getting on for a year since Charlie Kirk was killed. Charlie Kirk, the conservative influencer, hugely important in the re-election of Donald Trump. His trial is just about getting underway amid a whole range of conspiracy theories about why he was killed. Anthony, get us up to date, first of all, with what it is that's actually happening in that trial.
This is a preliminary measure. It's essentially like a 5-day mini trial where the prosecutors are presenting their evidence, not to a jury, but to the presiding judge in this case. And the judge will decide whether aggravated murder charges are appropriate here. And those aggravated murder charges would carry a possible death sentence. So they're presenting evidence, they're presenting videos, they're presenting testimony. In fact, they're going to play some of the interview with Lance Twigg, who was Tyler Robinson's romantic partner, and he was the one who ultimately turned Robinson in and is cooperating with the prosecution. There's going to be video of the murder played out in court. All of this is being live streamed, so we're going to be able to keep track of what's going on inside the courtroom. It is happening in Provo, Utah, and Erica Kirk, the widow of Charlie Kirk, has been in attendance. She has a lawyer there who has been occasionally interjecting. So this is essentially a preview into what the trial will be and giving us a little hint of what kind of a case the prosecution has.
Right. So, I mean, it's when we say preliminary, there is real stuff happening. I mean, these are real arguments, and they're arguments that obviously could have a huge impact on the case itself. But they're also the first opportunities, I suppose, for us to hear some evidence, and for Charlie Kirk's family, and indeed his widow, to come face to face with this man who's accused of shooting him.
Right. And so it's a preview. Because, as you mentioned, there are so many conspiracy theories floating around now within the right-wing movement that Charlie Kirk created. This, in theory, might dispel some of them, but it also, if things aren't presented clearly, or if not all of the evidence is allowed to be aired during this preliminary hearing, it might fan some of the flames of the conspiracy theories. And you have to remember the importance of Charlie Kirk. We talked about this after he was killed last year, but he was a central figure in the conservative youth movement. And even more than that, he was a central figure in Donald Trump's re-election campaign. His Turning Point organization essentially took over the ground game for the Republican Party in the run-up to the November 2024 presidential election. And he was a big reason why the youth vote, which normally Democrats dominate, ended up breaking to Donald Trump, at least among young white males, and certainly the margins overall much closer than they normally are.
Yeah, and when he was killed, there was this outpouring, wasn't there, of grief among those who loved him. And many people loved him, but also this kind of reaction on the broader left as what is it acceptable to say about him, given that many people on the left disliked him extremely. And it was just one of those moments, wasn't it? We should remind ourselves, actually, Anthony, we got some clips of the reaction that there was, the various reactions that there were on that terrible day. Let's just listen to those.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Maurice Dubois. The conservative political activist Charlie Kirk has died after being shot in the neck during an event.
I don't know where we go from here in a news program, and I don't know where we go from here in America.
If you thought that my husband's mission was powerful before, you have no idea. You have no idea what you just have unleashed across this entire country.
Evil thought that there would be a funeral today. God has created a revival right here in this house right now.
Charlie didn't just bring young people into the movement. All of a sudden it started to grow by leaps and bounds. By 2024, we won more young people than any Republican candidate in the history of our country, including for the first time a majority of males under 30. Can you believe it?
My friends, for Charlie, we must remember that he is a hero to the United States of America, and he is a martyr for the Christian faith. May our Heavenly Father give us the courage to live as Charlie lived, That is what we must do for Charlie. You ran a good race, my friend. I love you. We've got it from here. Thank you.
So you heard Donald Trump there, J.D. Vance, the vice president, speaking, and a lot of conservative commentators. So I think that those clips do kind of capture, one, the initial shock at his death, but also this rallying kind of a feeling that there was in the young conservative movement around what Kirk was trying to do, and this feeling like this was a moment, a inflection point where more young people were going to be drawn to this conservative movement, a revival, as one of those commentators put it, where people were going to be drawn towards the kind of Christian evangelism that Kirk embraced. He was a controversial figure. He did say things that, as you mentioned, Justin, made a lot of people on the left angry, things about gay rights, things about women's rights, and yet at that moment, it felt like something big was going to happen after his death. Now, I don't know, Justin. It doesn't seem like we are where we thought we were going to be in just about a year's time.
Yeah, no, and that's so much the modern world, isn't it? In the modern media world, you expect certain things to happen, and they just don't. And I suppose, I mean, part of it, and we'll talk about the conspiracy theories and all of that in a second, because it is a very important part of this story. But just factually, when it comes to people's political, and particularly young people, and particularly young men's political attraction to Donald Trump, which is the single thing that Charlie Kirk was massively involved with and successful with, it is fair to say, isn't it, not only that Charlie Kirk is no longer here, but also that some of the things that attracted them to Donald Trump are also not here. I mean, specifically, for instance, the promise that there wouldn't be wars, endless wars that involved American troops and American money overseas. That was enormously popular, wasn't it? But it hasn't exactly happened. And you know, then you can get to all the cost of living stuff. In other words, there are all sorts of basic, fundamental political things that have changed in a direction that hasn't benefited the idea that young men would carry on supporting Donald Trump.
Right. I think those are all key factors in this. And now that we have a little perspective, we can look back at one of the ways that Donald Trump was able to capitalize on young men in particular and young voters, their distrust of institutions, their disillusionment with the status quo. They were frustrated by the Democrats and Biden. It felt stale. He felt old. They were frustrated by cost of living and inflation. And Donald Trump presented a different choice for them, which is one of the reasons why he made such big inroads during that presidential campaign. And for all the reasons that you just ticked through, Justin, the fact that cost of living hasn't gone down, inflation, if anything, has continued to go up, and in particular, that war in Iran and the promise Donald Trump made of no foreign wars. And here he is not only launching an extended military operation in Iran, but the knock-on effects of that raised prices at the fuel pumps, raised prices at the grocery store. And when I've been out talking to young voters, and we've talked about this before in places like the CPAC conference, conservative conference in Dallas, and on the campaign trail, I hear time and time again that it's young voters, young conservative voters, who are the most frustrated and the most willing to question Donald Trump among the entirety of his base right now.
Yeah. And the administration, frankly, is aware of that, isn't it, and has struggled a bit to try to get them back on board and to try to explain itself to them. And in a sense, a struggle that's been more difficult in the absence of Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk was so good at doing the explaining and the geeing up and the enthusing and all the rest of it. It's worth listening to J.D. Vance. So J.D. Vance actually at a Turning Point event, so Turning Point, Charlie Kirk's organization, which his widow's now in charge of, actually at an event that Turning Point had organized, trying to explain in particular that business of why America had gone to war again. Let's listen to him.
When you see a politician or you see a political movement or you see an administration that isn't doing what you want to do, I think you have two choices. You can say, to hell with those people and check out of the process. Or you can say, you know what, I'm going to get more involved. I'm going to make my voice heard even more. I'm going to pressure that administration to do exactly what I want them to do because they got my vote, they earned my vote, but they can't take it for granted. And I've seen some of this, on various issues. Like for example, I recognize that a lot of young voters don't love the policy that we have in the Middle East. Okay, I understand that. I also know that we've secured the border. We've lowered housing prices now for 8 months in a row, and there's going to be more to come beyond that. We've made America energy dominant, which has lowered electricity costs and things like that. We've made it so that we have the lowest murder rate in 127 years. I'm not saying you have to agree with me on every issue. I'm not saying you have to agree with me on every issue. What I'm saying is don't get disengaged because you disagree with the administration on one topic. Get more involved.
I mean, the very fact that J.D. Vance there, Anthony, is having to say, to plead almost, don't get disengaged, that they are aware that there is something happening, that they're finding it difficult to control, and that Charlie Kirk would have been very good at controlling, but he's not there to do it.
Right, trying to convince people not to be cynical or pessimistic when cynicism and pessimism are one of the reasons why they become disillusioned with the Democrats, and now that has flipped around and is a problem that they're having to deal with. It's very telling to hear him lay that all out that way. And maybe Charlie Kirk could have been a better pitchman, could have convinced some of these young voters that the Iran war wasn't all that bad. But then maybe there was no one who could. And maybe Charlie Kirk would have been one of the more outspoken critics. We don't know now, but Vance on his own clearly can't do it.
Talking of young voters, Mariana has joined us. I'm delighted to say hi there. Take up that point there, Mariana, about the link between the Republicans and the young, because it's so important, isn't it? And it's partly the online link, but it's also it's a real link, isn't it? It's a link that actually matters, because young people at the last election voted for Donald Trump in numbers that were important to him.
Yeah, I think that the thing about Charlie Kirk is he was such an asset from the point of view for the Republican Party in terms of reaching younger voters who aren't engaged with the traditional, professional, conventional media and who turn to social media for what they're looking at. And he was incredibly good at ensuring that his content was being promoted by the algorithmic systems, that people were seeing it. And a lot of people took their lead from what he was saying. And I think that that's what they've really lost with Charlie Kirk, which is that he had the ability to articulate his argument and influence an audience, and there doesn't seem to have been anyone else who's stepped up and filled that gap in quite the same way. I think the Middle East is a really good example of that. Quite a lot of the conspiracy theories about Charlie Kirk's assassination, killing, have been connected to anti-Israel ideas. I think they've lost two things. I think they've lost the ability, because of the death of Charlie Kirk, to articulate these ideas to younger audiences and to reach them and to effectively engage with them. But they've also, and not entirely obviously, there are still influencers and other streamers who do connect with these audiences, but Charlie Kirk was particularly good at it. And then I think they've also lost Charlie Kirk explaining to them what's going on social media and what younger voters are thinking and feeling and caring about. And I think that connection actually perhaps is more detrimental to them than the former.
It's a bit pathetic, actually. You've got one or two candidates still kind of trying to trade off his name. This guy, Nate Morris, for instance, in Kentucky, is actually, he was running for the Senate seat. He withdrew a few months ago, but his ads, we should listen to one of them, actually. So these ads specifically saying he was the last US Senate candidate that Charlie Kirk ever endorsed. Nate Morris in Kentucky. Here he is.
More fighters. Fighters like Nate Morris. That's why Charlie Kirk endorsed Nate Morris.
Nate Morris, we're behind you.
You're a successful business guy, really strong.
Charlie Kirk endorsed Nate Morris, the real Trump guy for U.S. Senate.
I'm Nate Morris, and I approve this message.
When you've got someone like Nate Morris referencing Charlie Kirk, the assumption is that Charlie Kirk holds the same status in the social media world that he did when he was alive. And actually, I would say that one of the things that has happened since he was killed is that he's become a bit of a kind of joke figure. Like, he's incredibly memeified, if that's the right verb. There are loads of, there's loads of really sort of absurd memes, videos, songs about Charlie Kirk. And in some ways, like, Charlie Kirk has become quite uncool in the social media world, which is surprising because before that he was someone who was very capable at commanding the online space. But actually he's become this sort of like figure of ridicule to some extent online. And I think that could help to explain why Turning Point as a movement hasn't necessarily experienced a bump because he was killed, and also explains why stuff like Nate Morris saying, well, Charlie Kirk endorsed me, doesn't necessarily go down particularly well.
I wonder if there are two reasons for that. The first is that Erica Kirk has struggled a bit, hasn't she, to keep it going. So she's meant to be in charge. But actually there are events she's had to pull out from, incredibly, because of death threats against her, presumably credible threats, and the massive amount of abuse that she gets. And there was one particular event, wasn't there, a few months ago, where she pulled out because of security concerns. So in a sense, there hasn't been, there's been a vacuum there, which exactly as you say, Marion, has led to this sort of huge ability of those who want to fill that space to do it on their own terms. But also, the people who you might have thought, Anthony, would keep the flame burning, and I'm thinking particularly of Tucker Carlson, about whom we often talk, but also Candace Owens as well, another of these kind of right-wing figures that actually they haven't exactly done him any favours, have they? Because they've just been increasingly wild, it seems to me, and all the allegations they're making about why he was killed. I mean, we started by talking about the trial. Their view, Anthony, isn't it, is the one person that we've got in front of a court is actually the least of it. They want to blame almost everyone else.
Right. I mean, the conspiracy theories, and Mariana will go into this, I'm sure, is that Charlie Kirk was killed by the Israelis, killed by the Mossad, that it was because he was critical of the war in Gaza, critical of Israel, and so they had to silence him. There's obviously no evidence of that, but it's tearing apart the youth conservative movement. People like Ben Shapiro, who used to be a kind of a leading figure among younger conservatives, he's being blamed by people like Candace Owens for being in on this and having advanced notice of what was, in their view, an assassination. I mean, it's remarkable how quickly all of this has curdled.
These influencers are all competing in lots of ways for views and likes and engagement, and they trade off the theories they can come up with, the kind of content they share. And to be honest, it's actually not that surprising that these are people who haven't necessarily sort of piled in behind and said, we must honour Charlie Kirk's legacy and this is what we're going to do. They're people who have taken this death, and they would probably disagree with this fact, but created more content out of it and got more views and more likes, and ultimately have kind of succeeded in that engagement battle. But also, I think that Erica Kirk, like you highlighted, Justin, has really struggled to command the social media forum in the way that Charlie Kirk, her husband, did. And she's found herself the target of a huge range of memes. I mean, there's so much content about Erica Kirk basically turning up at these quite like glamorous rallies, which are very MAGA coded and very, they're very what you would expect from the kinds of events that Charlie Kirk would have spoken at or that she speaks at. But they often have there's often people taking the mick out of the fact that there's like fireworks or glittery outfits or all of these things that feels sometimes at odds with the fact that her husband was killed. And I think that tonally, the content she's been creating, whether it's her own social media content or rallies she's been at, has not gone down particularly well because people haven't felt like it's authentic. And as ever in the social media world, authenticity is key. And one of the reasons why Charlie Kirk was so successful is because he would go to colleges, he would go to college campuses, he would debate people, and it was very authentic, it was very raw in that sense, and people liked that. And I think that his wife, his grieving wife, which is worth pointing out, has struggled to match that style and has found herself the subject of all sorts of criticism and trolling and everything else. And actually Turning Point has kind of become a bit uncool.
So I think we're quite clear that the killing itself reduced the force of the online right when it came to young people and young men in particular, because Charlie Kirk was a unique voice, and without that voice they are going to be less successful in that area. And then on top of that, I think we're saying the kind of explosion of mostly nonsense and some of it really unpleasant stuff in the months after his killing has also not done any good to the idea that people will come out in a regimented way and vote for Republican candidates and vote for the next Republican presidential candidate as well. So in both of those things, the Republicans have been reduced. But I wonder, Anthony, are we saying then that young white men who are such an important constituency for the Republicans when you think ahead to the midterm elections this November. And we've been talking recently, haven't we, about the various ways in which the Democrats seem to be shooting themselves in the foot. But is the beginning of the trial a reminder that actually they have lost something, the Republicans, that could really cost them at the ballot box?
Yeah, I think that there's plenty of evidence now that young men are distrustful of institutions. They feel alienated. They are anti-establishment, and the Republicans at this point have become the establishment. They control all three branches of the U.S. government. Donald Trump is the one making the calls from the White House, and so if you're going to be anti-establishment, then it's going to take a toll on the party in power, and that's the Republicans right now. So I think some of this is natural, and some of this, as we discussed, are active decisions and choices that Trump made. I do think it's fascinating what Mariana said about how Charlie Kirk now has become a bit of a joke, which caught me a bit off guard. But then again, I look at Nate Morris and I look at Thomas Massie and how they tried to cite Charlie Kirk as evidence of their bona fides, and both of them lost. And I guess maybe that shows how fickle, particularly among young people, their opinions are, and how hard it is to stay in touch with this and to try to harness that anti-establishment, that distrust of institutions, and harness it into something that is durable for one side or the other.
And I also think, to some extent, watching this all unfold, like you said earlier, Justin, but the images of Charlie Kirk being shot were everywhere over social media. There's been constant speculation about the alleged shooter. There has been all sorts of content about Erica Kirk, and almost to the point where it feels like it's not real. And I think a lot of younger voters are experiencing this through their social media feeds in this sort of hyper reality way, where it almost doesn't really feel like someone was killed. And the way they're behaving online is sort of not like someone was killed. It's like it's a joke or absurd or weird. And I think that the Republicans do not benefit from that at all, because it's almost like, well, that was a phase and that's what we were doing now. That's what we were doing then, and let's see what we're going to do now. And so I think in order to tap into that younger electorate, particularly when it comes to like younger men, you've got to better understand the spaces that they're in. I mean, you think of someone like Hassan Piker, who is, a controversial and prominent influencer who essentially uses gaming to speak to people about politics. It's like that's kind of the new evolution. That's the new evolution of this stuff. He's very left wing. Are there people on the right who are going to tap into that audience in the same way? At the moment, it feels like the Charlie Kirk shaped hole is still quite large.
That's it for today. All our episodes, of course, available wherever you get your podcasts. Bye-bye.